Greetings and welcome to ETV English Special Programs. I am Kirana Baina. In today's episode, we look at the role of the Ethiopian diaspora in the period of peace building for the country. For the discussion today, I am joined by the President and Vice Chair of the Ethio-Canadian Network for Advocacy and Support, Dr. Tuhut Asfaw and Mr. Samanah Jambara, respectively. Thank you very much for joining us, and do stay with the remainder of the program. Well, thank you both for joining me and giving me the time today. So let's start this off by asking, we've all heard about the role of the diaspora throughout the 2 years of conflict that has been going on in Ethiopia. It was shown in different ways of demonstrating, of trying to, debunk the misrepresentation of Ethiopia in the countries where you're all located. So my first question is actually, what has been the contribution of the diaspora towards a peace process? And let me give the chance to Dr. Tuhut first.
Thank you, Kidan. First of all, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come and share our views at this program. The diaspora activities are actually multifaceted. If I speak for the organization I represent, the Ethio-Canadian Network for Advocacy and Support, we were established in 2020 following the TPLF aggression against the Ethiopian Northern Defense Force. And we were established by having this deep understanding of the imminent threat against our country's unity and territorial integrity. With the aim of supporting the effort that the government has been making in bringing lasting peace by bridging the gap between Ethiopian Canadians and the Ethiopian government, as well as by engaging in public diplomacy to combat disinformation and misinformation, mobilizing support, both financial and in kind, for people affected by TPLF aggression, and also by being a voice for our people who have been victims of repeated violence and displacement in various parts of Ethiopia, in Western Wallagga, Benishangul, North Shawa, and so on and so forth. And we have currently 11 chapters in major Canadian cities where we mobilize Ethiopian Canadians to support their country. So basically that's what we have been doing. And most of the organizations that we work with in the US, Europe, and others have been really working to be a voice to represent Ethiopia in many different platforms by organizing pro-Ethiopia rallies, mobilizing the Ethiopians in many different countries against the misinformation and disinformation that was being shared in many different avenues. So maybe I will stop here because I know we'll go deeper. I'll stop here for now.
All right, so Samanah, if you have something different to add to that, and if you want to elaborate more, I think Dr. Tuhut said it in general, but let me give you the chance, Samanah, to add on that.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us in the first place. So I think, as Dr. Tuhut has said, the Ethiopian diaspora is a very huge force, a very formidable force, which is always standing for the betterment and for the peace of the country. And we have been demonstrating that in different ways. We have different structures in the community. We have Ethiopian community associations, we have got religious organizations, and so forth. And through this, we have been advocating throughout the times for peace to come in Ethiopia. And we have also been advocating with the government of Canada by writing petition letters, by writing letters to protest letters and so forth. And not only that, we have been also developing articles, opinion papers, and so forth, and distributing it and sending it through the social media like Facebook, Twitter, and what have you. So it is a very multifaceted advocacy process and programs that the Ethiopian diaspora has been following through.
All right, so now bringing to the actual, peace agreement that took place, it's an AU-led process. And the thing about this process is it was kind of downplayed and looked down on by the TPLF back then. It was regarded as something that might not maybe work. However, it has worked, and we have reached to a peace agreement. So my second question is going to be, what has been, the overall observation within the two of you, for instance, about when it comes to the AU-led peace process that has brought about a successful agreement? Dr. Tuta, once again, let me let you go ahead.
Thank you. We were very excited to begin with to hear the signing of the agreement in South Africa, which is very unexpected, I must say. Yes, there has been negotiations happening, but that was, I think, a great achievement on the part of the conflicting parties, as well as the African Union, for leading such a huge endeavor and bringing it to fruition. ECNAS has already released a statement regarding this agreement, we felt this is a unique opportunity for peace that marks the beginning of a long-term process that will require a deliberate effort in the course of its implementation. Yes, there is a lot of optimism that this peace agreement will provide a basis for building lasting peace, which will usher in a new chapter for peaceful, vibrant, democratic, and united Ethiopia. And the timing of the peace agreement also coincided with the second-year anniversary of the TPLF attack on our National Defense Force, which signals the need for ceasing hostilities to avoid further bloodshed and human suffering in Ethiopia. That's why we called upon, when I say we, I'm referring to ECNAS, called upon all Ethiopians and friends of Ethiopia to support this new beginning of peace. Yes, most of us have been speaking against human rights abuses in many parts of Ethiopia due to the ongoing conflict. And we feel that this is a first step in the peace building process to protect human rights, to provide humanitarian aid, and to achieve equality and sustainable development for our nation and the Horn of Africa and Africa at large.
All right, so now moving on to, what's expected in the time that's going to come forward, because after this there's going to be a lot of peace building processes, and there's a long journey to go ahead to consolidate this peace agreement. So Sabana, what I want to ask you is, what's going to be the role of the diaspora in consolidating this? I mean, in making sure that there's trust that's built between the parties that have signed the agreement, and also, sustainably resolving the conflict. There are many actors that are going to be involved, and surely the diaspora is one of them. So what can the diaspora do? What do you think?
Thank you, but I just want to take you a little bit back of what Dr. Tut has said. Initially, when this peace process started in South Africa, many of the diaspora was very skeptical about its outcome. And the reason being is that there are two reasons for that. One is understanding and knowing very well the history of the TPLF from its inception in 1970 up to today, that they are not always in favor of peace. And we were very skeptical that this may come out with a good result. And the second thing is that there were a lot of actors in this process, both internal and external, particularly the external community, or the international community was highly involved in this and were very skeptical. And the international community was mostly in favor of TPLF. So we never expected a very good outcome from that. But fortunately, now the peace accord has been signed in South Africa beyond our belief. And Ethio-Canadians and everywhere any diaspora, I think the great majority of them are very supportive of this. So what shall we do in order to sustain this peace accord? I think the diaspora has a big role. In my view, the diaspora has been always a problem and always a supportive to Ethiopia. So we are both the cause, well, not the cause, but we're also the problem. And when we got this peace signed a few days ago, every diaspora was very jubilant, because we believe that there is a saying in Ethiopia, the local weed must be plowed out by the local oxen, we say. And that is what happened in the peace accord. The problem was solved by the African Union and were very impressive. So our role now is, in order to sustain the peace, the diaspora should continue making a lot of advocacy, educating the spirit of the letter of the understanding to the international community, to the Canadian Parliament, to the Canadian public, and also elsewhere in the United States and so forth. So we should be able to, and we have to speak. And as I said it earlier, there are a lot of community structures, religious structures are very solid in Canada and the United States. Ethiopian community associations are very solid. And so this, we should be able to advocate for the peace to be fruitful. And the other thing is, diaspora should refrain itself from using very bad languages, which is very damaging to peace. And we have to be very selective of our languages and so forth. So I think that is how we can be able to sustain and maintain the peace.
All right, Dr. Tuhut, let me give you a chance to add on that.
Yes, thank you. I think what I would say is we all have to give peace a chance. That's what we have been advocating for in the past few days. Let's give peace a chance, because I personally understand the legitimate fears and concerns from people, for example, what Ato Samana here mentioned. However, we also need to understand this is just the beginning of a long-term process, which will result in peace if things go smoothly. So we have to work together to make this happen. Peace will not come by wish only. We all want to have peace in our country. We are saying enough already for bloodshed, for destruction, for all of that. But we all have to work together to bring that change that we would like to see. We have to be part of the solution as well. We should all be united in our effort to see this peace agreement to come to fruition. We also have to understand disarming the TPLF fighters and demobilizing the army is a huge undertaking. That's why we should support the smooth implementation of the agreement to ensure restoration of law and order, as well as to see the complete cessation of hostilities. This development, of course, will contribute to the peace of not just Ethiopia, but also the larger Horn of Africa, and working with others, our allies in many parts of the world, including Canada, would definitely help see the change we'd like to see. As we know, many of these people that in the conflict areas are still suffering from lack of resources, food shortage, damaged infrastructure, etc. And the diaspora community has a large role that we can play to mobilize this kind of support, to support our affected communities in the conflict areas. And also the dialogue, interactive webinars and publications to be included in our advocacy approach, and to continue to debunk the misinformation from the different individuals, very powerful institutions like the media and other Western organizations or Western governments. I think that effort has to continue, and we cannot now just wait for something to happen, but be part of all of this process going forward.
All right, very important point. However, now, following this peace agreement, all that, the details being in place, there's still one major thing that remains. I mean, after a period of conflict, there are people and societies that have been hurt, that have been displaced, and that requires rehabilitation, rebuilding, and, just the conflict-affected areas and communities need to be rebuilt and, re-sustained. So, in that regard, besides the actual peace agreement, besides the bureaucracy of it, what can the diaspora do for the society on the ground to rebuild these afflicted areas and communities? What can we expect from the diaspora? Either if you can take up the answer for this one.
Yeah. I can speak, from ICNA's point of view, what we have been discussing and what we have been doing so far. In the past 2 years, we have established this huge network of people that have been working with us to mobilize resources, financial resources, medical supplies, and other needs as well. So that is something that has to continue, and this is not a time to stop that. So if we want to have healing in those areas, in areas that people are heavily impacted by the conflict, we have to continue to support our communities impacted by the conflict. That could include providing financial support, providing money to buy food, even basic necessities for men and women and children that have been affected by the conflict. I think the other thing that's really heavy in my heart is the women that have been raped or sexually assaulted during the conflict by either of any of the parties. That is an area that we need to focus on to make sure that there will be psychosocial support for women impacted by those acts of aggression, but also children that have seen gruesome attacks on their families, on people they know. They have witnessed very gruesome actions which would stay in their mind for a long time. So I think our support, the diaspora has a lot of capacity, and there are a lot of people that would come in and support in areas of psychosocial need, as well as material, medical supplies, even counseling, and even being there as family, as friends, saying we are with you, we haven't forgotten you, and this too shall pass. So that sending that positive message, as Ato Samana was saying, there are a lot of negative information, that's being shared in many social media platforms. I think we have to continue to send positive messages and just support as needed, especially in efforts being coordinated by the government. I think we have to make sure there won't be an overlap. Sometimes there is a tendency to just stay in one area, but just looking at the assessment that's being done and making sure we will be responding as needed.
Mr. Samana, do you have something different to add to that?
Well, I don't have a lot to add, to be honest with you, but I think one thing I would like to emphasize is that the diaspora fully understands the gargantuan loss of life, property, and so forth during this senseless war of 2 years. And many of the diaspora are willing to provide both financially, materially, intellectually, and psychosocially. So we need to mobilize this community in order to support their people. But when we are doing this, there is also an obligation that has to be expected from the Ethiopian government and from the local administration service. They need to make the bureaucracy more smooth, more friendly, so that we can be able to deliver services and humanitarian assistance to the affected regions. But the affected part of the Amhara, Tigray, and Afar, and name it, is so huge, it is beyond comprehension. I have traveled with the UN work in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so forth. I have never seen a devastation like this that we experienced in the Afar and the Amhara region, and in Tigray as well. So people are really keen to support, but we need also to make the process of administration and the bureaucracy to bring in humanitarian assistance into the region and into the country. And that is the responsibility of the government.
All right. So if we're done on that, I'm going to take us back to what you said earlier, actually, Samana, and you said something about abiding by the Constitution. However, that's that's a bit a blurred line for some. And now I was going to raise the question of factors that are going to threaten this peace deal, and that might be brought up by different actors or bodies that may raise this. So one of my major questions on that is, what can we do to rebuff the factors that will threaten building peace? And I'm going to ask you in the diaspora perspective. And can you please elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I think that is very easy. I think what we have to do with the diaspora is that we need to organize discussion forums, town hall meetings, bring the people, everybody, all actors into the round table. And we need to discuss openly This is our problem. This is our issue. And we need to discuss that in an open spirit for the sake of peace and for the sake of the stability of Ethiopia as a nation. We love it. I have never seen a diaspora in other communities where they fought for their country like the Ethiopian diaspora. The Ethiopian diaspora is doing a phenomenal job. And we need to build on that and bring them, but we need to open with them very honestly, candidly, frankly, and bring them to be part of the solution, not to be part of the problem.
All right, Dr. Tooth, anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think the diaspora has not still been invited to be part of the national dialogue and reconciliation, the national dialogue discussions that will be happening in Ethiopia. I know there is a lot of groundwork that's being done. I think the diaspora needs to be at the table also, because as we know, the diaspora could be part of the problem, but there are a lot of groups or individuals who are also part of the solution. So there has to be an opportunity to be part of this national dialogue for the diaspora to engage in a meaningful way as we emerge from this violent shadow of the TPLF. We have to be united. We have to sit together and discuss these thorny issues that have been in the shadow, in the background for many years and that have not been addressed. So for us to have a lasting solution or long-term peace or sustainable peace, the underlying causes of the conflict have to be addressed. And for that to happen, we need to have a discussion, a dialogue. And I appreciate what's happening right now in kickstarting the national dialogue here in Ethiopia, but it has to also include the diaspora to make it more lasting and more meaningful. The other thing I would like to also go back is to the point Mr. Samana said, Ethiopia has this social capital. We have the faith-based institutions, networks, a lot of strong assets that we can tap from. So I think that the health for our dialogue to be healthy, we have to center our discussions around those social capitals that we have and bring them back and enliven them and use them. So I think we have to resurrect those, the respect, the sharing, the love, all of those things that we had. It has to come back for healing to happen. That's what I would like to add.
Can I add just one few words to what Dr. Tuhut has said? The social capital which exists among the diaspora is very huge and very, very constructive. Myself and Dr. Tuhut, very recently, 2 weeks ago or so, we appeared at the Canadian Parliament in order to advocate for Ethiopia. And it was a very rare occasion that we got that. And there was one question that one of the parliamentarians asked Dr. Tuhut: what is the role of the religious institutions in order to bring peace in northern Ethiopia? And exactly what she said is that the institutions are well built, they have a big social capital, and we have it inherently from tradition. That's the role of the church in bringing peace is very huge.
So now, during the time of the conflicts in Ethiopia, we've seen much intervention from the West. Different narratives have been skewed and different threats have been voiced from different directions. So now, in the face of that, we've seen the diaspora protest, go to Twitter to use that platform, etc. So now, in regards to the peace agreement, there might be some kind of Western intervention that stands against it. So in the face of that, what can the diaspora do to prevent it now from actually happening instead of, we've seen efforts after Western intervention. Now we're talking about what can the diaspora do to prevent this Western intervention in the face of the peace deal. Let me give let me give you the chance to take this up.
Thank you. The diaspora has been already mobilized. We have strong networks, not just in one country, but we do also cross-country networking which is very important, that needs to continue. So we have to build on what we have achieved so far. I know many people are saying, okay, there is a peace agreement signed now, everything would be, you know, wonderful and smooth, but we have to know, I think this is the time that we have to escalate also our intervention and continue to do what we have been doing, reaching out to the different government decision makers, policy makers in the countries that we are in. For example, in Canada, Samane mentioned, we were in the parliament where we spoke to the House of Commons subcommittee on a subcommittee on human rights and international relations. So I think we have to continue doing that and build our relationship with them, build trust with these government officials in different places, continue to advocate for our country, speaking truth with power. That is something that has to continue. The diaspora is huge, especially in North America and in Europe, in some places in the UK. But it's just, we have not been speaking in a united voice. So I think this is a time that we have to understand what we have gone through in the past should be a lesson for us. And we should say never again. We should never let that happen again on our watch. So we have to stand firm and bold and just avoid any differences, minimize the differences that we have, and tackle one issue at a time. It is not possible to address this complex problem that our country is facing just in one go, right? So we have to continue being focused, being a voice, a strong voice. But also the other thing we have been working on is working with members of parliament to show that we are strong, we are united, and we can also be supportive of the work they do. And they need us. It's just that this relationship is a two-way street. We need them to speak on our behalf in the parliament and in policy decisions. They also need us to support them during election time. So we have to be engaged. We have to be part of the civic engagement in the countries that we are living in and support these powerful people to show that we are also a force that can support, that can bring a change in the countries that we live in. So I think we have to continue to do that in terms of also making sure that we are united, we are supporting this peace initiative. We want peace. I think our voice has to be strong, has to be united, and we have to work together and avoid any division by any means. So that's my view.
Well, I think Dr. Tuhut has said it very, very well. But there is one thing that I would like to highlight. The moment that the peace accord was signed in South Africa, the international community, particularly of the Western nations, were extremely supported and delighted. From the surface, I don't know underneath, but they were very happy. They issued press releases. The very first country to recognize was the United States, and then the European Union, and then followed the Canadian Foreign Ministry and so forth. So they are supporting. But of course, now the devil is in the details, and the details will come in the coming weeks and months and so forth. But I think they are very supportive, and we need to capitalize on this support and push our community to advocate for peace, and for peace. That's it. And the way we have to do it is that we have to come out in the form of demonstrations, town hall meetings, and whatever, in writing letters and advocating, making advocacies with a member of parliamentarians and so forth. We need to make awareness among the Canadian public and the American public, for that matter. So we should continue the momentum of advocating for peace and support. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both very much for your time and your insights. It was a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much once again. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of today's special programs. We've talked about the role of the Ethiopian diaspora in the peace-building process that lays ahead for Ethiopia. Thank you once again for joining us. I was Kirana Boyne leading you through the program, and goodbye for now.